I'm Olivia Hughes, 27 years old, and until last year, I was just another marketing assistant in Portland with a dream that seemed impossible, owning my own home on a modest salary. When I stumbled across a tax auction listing for a house priced at $900, it felt like the universe was finally giving me a chance. What I didn't expect was my family's reaction when I chose this opportunity over funding my sister Melissa's life-changing yoga retreat. The look in my mother's eyes still haunts me as she spat the words, "Then live like junk. You've shamed this family." Before I tell you how I turned the worst day of my life into my greatest triumph, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if you've ever had to choose between your dreams and family expectations. Growing up in our middle-class neighborhood in Portland, the unspoken hierarchy in our family was clear, but never acknowledged openly. My sister Melissa, 2 years younger than me at 25, was always the golden child. Artistic, effortlessly, charismatic, and constantly exploring new passions that our parents Robert and Nancy Hughes enthusiastically supported. Meanwhile, I was cast as the responsible one, the steady counterbalance to Melissa's brilliant but erratic energy. This dynamic wasn't created through cruelty or deliberate favoritism, but through thousands of small moments that collectively shaped our family narrative. When Melissa needed new dance shoes, I learned to wait for my new sneakers until next month. When she needed extra tutoring for her struggles with math, I taught myself from the textbook. The expectation that I would accommodate, adapt, and make room for my sister's needs was woven into the fabric of our family from my earliest memories. I remember my 10th birthday when my parents had to leave early to take Melissa to an important audition. They promised we'd celebrate properly the following weekend, but something came up then too. By high school, this pattern was firmly established, with my achievements, class president, honor roll, yearbook editor, acknowledged with quick congratulations, while Melissa's smallest artistic endeavors were celebrated with dinner parties and framed displays. The real test came during college applications. Despite my higher GPA and multiple scholarship offers, my parents decided to redirect a portion of my college fund to help Melissa attend an exclusive art school that had offered her only partial funding. "You're so smart, you'll figure it out," my mother had said. And I did, working 20 hours weekly at a campus bookstore while maintaining my academic standing, graduating with student loans that I'm still paying off. After college, I secured a position at a marketing firm in Portland, moved into a shared apartment with 2 roommates to save money, and established a life independent from my family's orbit of Melissa-centric activities. I kept meticulous control of my finances, bringing lunch from home, buying clothes secondhand, using public transportation, all to build savings toward my dream of homeownership. My promotion 6 months ago to senior marketing assistant came with a modest salary. Increased that for the first time, gave me breathing room, and accelerated my savings plan. Meanwhile, Melissa had cycled through several career starts: fashion design, photography, interior decorating, each beginning with enthusiasm and parental investment, each ending when the reality of disciplined work outweighed the initial creative spark. What my sister didn't know, what my parents had carefully hidden from her, was that their financial situation had become increasingly precarious. During a rare lunch with just my father, he had reluctantly confessed that their retirement accounts had been significantly depleted, and they had taken a second mortgage on the family home. "But please don't mention this to your sister or mother," he had added hastily. "We'll figure it out." I nodded, understanding that in our family, protecting Melissa's bubble was the priority. The catalyst for everything that followed was a Sunday dinner at my parents' home 3 months ago. Melissa arrived last, practically vibrating with excitement, and waited until dessert to make her announcement. "I've been accepted to the Sacred Path Yoga Teacher Training Retreat in Bali," she proclaimed, pulling glossy brochures from her bag. "It's a 6-week intensive that will completely transform my practice and give me the certification to start teaching." As my parents exchanged uncertain glances, I calculated the cost in my head. International airfare, 6 weeks of accommodation. In Bali, the course fees, easily $3,500, probably more. Melissa continued, oblivious to the tension. "It starts in just 5 weeks, which is perfect timing for me to transition from the boutique." She had been working part-time at an upscale clothing store for about 4 months, her longest employment stint to date. My father cleared his throat. "That sounds wonderful, sweetheart, but that's quite an investment. Have you thought about the costs involved? Melissa's face fell slightly before she rallied. I've saved a little, and I thought maybe we could treat this as a family investment in my future career. Once I'm certified, I can start teaching right away. The look my parents exchanged was brief but loaded with meaning. And then, like clockwork, 3 sets of eyes turned to me. My mother spoke first, her voice casual but purposeful. Olivia, didn't you mention getting a raise recently? Family supports each other, and this sounds like such an amazing opportunity for your sister. The familiar weight of expectation settled on my shoulders, but this time something felt different. Perhaps it was the knowledge of my parents' financial struggles they were hiding from Melissa, or perhaps it was the nearly $40,000 I had painstakingly saved over years of sacrifice, now tantalizingly close to a down payment on a modest home. Whatever the reason, instead of my usual accommodating nod, I heard myself say, "Let me think about it," which in our family dynamics was practically a declaration of rebellion. The Portland housing market had been a source of constant frustration for me, with even the smallest condos in marginally safe neighborhoods starting well above what my careful budget could accommodate. I had been searching listings nightly for months, watching as properties were snapped up within days, often at 10 to 15% above asking price. My rental situation was becoming increasingly unstable as well. My roommates had both recently announced plans to move in with their respective partners, leaving me facing either finding new roommates or somehow affording the 2-bedroom apartment on my own. The discovery that changed everything happened entirely by accident 3 days after the family dinner, where Melissa announced her retreat plans. My coworker Lucas was researching tax auctions for a marketing client who specialized in property investment, and I was helping him organize information for the presentation. "Look at this one," Lucas said, pointing to his screen. $900 starting bid for a whole house. That's gotta be a typo. I leaned over to look at the listing. A small cottage-style home built in the 1920s in the Selwood neighborhood. The photos showed a clearly abandoned property with boarded windows, overgrown yard, and visible exterior damage, but the bones of something charming were still visible beneath the neglect. "It's probably got a lien against it or structural issues. That would cost tens of thousands to fix," Lucas said with a laugh. But something about the property captured my imagination. During my lunch break, I found myself researching the address, discovering it had been vacant for over 15 years following a tax default. The auction was scheduled for the following Saturday, just 3 days away. After work, I drove to the neighborhood to view the property from the outside. The street was better than I expected. A mix of well-maintained older homes and some in various stages of renovation, suggesting a neighborhood in transition. As I stood staring at the rundown cottage, an elderly Asian man emerged from the neighboring property. "You interested in the old Wilson place?" he asked. I introduced myself, and he identified himself as Mr. Chen, a 30-year resident of the neighborhood. "Sad story," he said, shaking his head. "The Wilson family, elderly couple, both passed within months of each other. Their son was supposed to inherit, but he had troubles. Addiction, I think. Never claimed the property, and it's been sitting empty since. Shame to see it fall apart. It was a beautiful home once." Encouraged by this encounter, I spent the evening researching renovation costs, zoning regulations, and property values in the area. The next day, I called Jake Martinez, a contractor friend from college who did budget renovations, and described the property. "Honestly, it's probably a money pit for most people," he said after looking up the listing I sent him. "But for someone willing to live in it while fixing it up slowly and do some of the work themselves, yeah, it could be a diamond in the rough. The location alone makes it worth considering if the price really is that low." For the next 2 days, I went back and forth, calculating costs, risks, and possibilities. The morning before the auction, Melissa called. "So, have you thought about what we discussed at dinner?" she asked without preamble. "About the retreat funding? I need to put down a deposit by next week to secure my spot." Her presumption that I would contribute without any acknowledgement of what she was asking me to sacrifice crystallized something in my mind. "I'll let you know tomorrow," I replied, making my decision in that moment. The auction was held in a drab conference room at the county administrative building. I arrived an hour early, clutching a cashier's check for $1,000. the maximum I was willing to bid plus fees. To my surprise, only 3 other people showed up, and 2 appeared to be together. When the Wilson property came up, I raised my bidder card for the minimum $900 bid, heart-pounding. The couple conferred briefly, but didn't counter. Going once, going twice, sold. Suddenly, improbably, I was a homeowner for less than the cost of a used laptop. The euphoria was immediate and overwhelming as I completed the paperwork and received the certificate of sale. In a daze, I drove directly to the property, my property, and stood on the crumbling sidewalk, staring at the dilapidated cottage with a mixture of elation and terror. What had I done? How would I tell my family? The thought of my parents' reaction, especially in light of Melissa's retreat expectations, tempered my excitement with anxiety. Still, as I peered through a gap in the boarded windows at the dust-filled interior, I felt a surge of determination. This was mine, the first thing that had ever been truly, solely mine, and somehow I would make it work. I called my best friend Aiko from the sidewalk in front of my new house, barely able to form coherent sentences through my excitement. "You did what?" she exclaimed, her voice a mixture of disbelief and admiration. $900? In Portland? That's not even a month's rent for a closet. I explained the condition of the house, the risks involved, and my tentative renovation plans while Aiko alternated between cautioning me about potential disasters and congratulating me on my boldness. "What did your family say?" she finally asked, hitting the question I'd been avoiding. "I haven't told them yet," I admitted. With Melissa's retreat thing hanging in the air, it's complicated. Aiko's silence spoke volumes. She had witnessed enough of my family dynamics over our decade of friendship to understand the implications. "Want me to come with you when you tell them?" she offered. I declined, but promised to call her afterward, regardless of the outcome. That evening, I received a text from my mother. "Dinner tomorrow at 6. Melissa has exciting updates about her retreat. Don't be late." The timing seemed cosmically engineered for maximum drama, but perhaps it was better to get everything out in the open at once. I spent a restless night alternating between watching YouTube videos about basic home repairs and rehearsing how to break my news to the family. When I arrived at my parents' house the following evening, Melissa's car was already in the driveway, alongside an unfamiliar vehicle that turned out to belong to her new boyfriend, Ethan, a yoga instructor she had apparently been dating for 3 weeks. Inside, my mother was setting the table with the good china, a sign that this dinner was considered a special occasion. "There she is," Melissa called when I entered, rushing over to hug me with unusual enthusiasm. "I have so much to tell you." Throughout the appetizer course, my mother's special occasion crab cakes, Melissa dominated the conversation with details about her retreat, the famous yoga instructors who would be teaching, and the networking opportunities that awaited her. Ethan, a lanky man with a perpetual serene smile, nodded sagely at everything she said and occasionally interjected with yoga terminology I didn't understand. As my mother served the main course, Melissa finally reached into her bag and pulled out several printed sheets. "So I've worked everything out financially," she announced, sliding papers toward our parents and me. I looked down to see a detailed breakdown of costs totaling $3,800, more than I had estimated, with a pie chart showing expected contributions. My portion was listed as $2,000, more than half the total cost. "I know it's a lot," Melissa continued, misinterpreting my shocked expression, "but I've already committed $500 from my savings, and Mom and Dad are covering the airfare and some spending money. Your part would cover the actual retreat tuition." She beamed at me expectantly while my parents studiously focused on their meals. "This is an amazing opportunity, Liv," my father finally said. "Your sister has found her calling, and family supports family." The moment stretched between us as I formulated my response, aware that what I said next would permanently alter our family dynamic. "I'm not able to contribute to the retreat," I said finally, my voice steadier than I expected. "I've made a significant financial commitment of my own." 4 sets of eyes fixed on me with varying degrees of confusion and suspicion. My mother set down her fork. "What kind of commitment?" she asked carefully. "I bought a house," I said, the words hanging in the air for a beat before I added, "Yesterday, at auction." Melissa laughed, clearly believing I was joking. "No, seriously, what's going on?" My father leaned forward. "Olivia, what are you talking about? You don't have enough saved for a down payment yet." "It was a tax auction property," I explained, pulling up photos on my phone. The winning bid was $900. I passed my phone to my father, watching as his expression shifted from confusion to disbelief as he swiped through the pictures of the dilapidated cottage. "This is uninhabitable," he said finally. My mother took the phone from him, her lips thinning as she examined the images. "You spent money on this garbage, instead of helping your sister?" Melissa grabbed the phone next, her earlier joy evaporating as she scrolled through the pictures. "This is a joke, right? You can't seriously have chosen this over my retreat." I tried to explain my reasoning. The opportunity the property represented, the financial calculations I'd made, my conversations with the contractor. But with each word, the atmosphere in the room grew heavier. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" My mother interrupted. "Your sister has a real chance at building a career, at finding her path, and you've thrown it away on a dumpster." Ethan, looking uncomfortable, murmured something about negative energy and excused himself to the living room. "I've been saving for years," I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "This is my chance to build something for myself instead of always putting everyone else first." My father shook his head, disappointment etched in every line of his face. "This isn't about putting yourself first, Olivia. This is about making smart decisions versus foolish ones. That house will drain every penny you have and still be worthless." Melissa pushed back from the table, tears streaming down her face. "You've ruined everything," she cried. "The deposit is due next week, and without your part, I can't go. Do you know how competitive it was to get accepted? This was my one chance." The argument escalated, voices rising until our neighbors could surely hear through the open dining room windows. My mother followed Melissa to comfort her, while my father and I continued our increasingly heated exchange in the dining room. "You've always been the responsible one," he said, his voice heavy with disappointment. "I never thought you'd do something so impulsive and selfish." When my mother returned, her face was flushed with anger. "Well, I hope you're happy with your decision. Your sister is devastated." I stood, gathering my things, recognizing that no productive conversation could happen now. "I'm sorry Melissa is upset, but this is important to me. I think it's best if I go." As I headed for the door, my mother's voice stopped me cold. "Then go live in your junk house if that's what you value. You've shamed this family with your selfishness." My father didn't contradict her, his silence an endorsement of her judgment. "Don't come back until you've fixed your priorities," my mother added as I stepped onto the porch, the door closing firmly behind me before I could respond. I stood there for a long moment, the weight of their rejection pressing against my chest, until it became difficult to breathe. Then slowly, I walked to my car and drove away from the only family I had ever known. Aiko's one-bedroom apartment became my temporary sanctuary for the next week as the reality of my situation settled in. "You can stay as long as you need," she insisted, making up the sofa with extra blankets and clearing a drawer for my clothes. During the day, I went through the motions at work, fielding curious questions about my distracted state with vague references to family issues, while spending lunch breaks making calls about utilities and researching the permits I would need. Evenings were spent with Aiko, alternating between planning sessions with notebook and calculator, and tearful breakdowns that left me questioning every choice that had led to this point. 1 week after the auction, I finally gathered the courage to visit the house, my house, with the keys I had received from the county clerk's office. The reality of what I had purchased hit harder in daylight than it had through the auction. Listing photos. The front porch sagged dangerously on one side. The yard was a jungle of weeds and debris, and the interior, once I managed to remove one of the boards from a window to peer inside, was worse than I had imagined. Decades of neglect had left water damage on the ceilings, floors buckled in several places, and evidence of various unwelcome animal visitors throughout. Standing in what I assumed was once the living room, The magnitude of what I had taken on crashed over me like a physical wave. I sank to the floor, heedless of the dust and grime, and gave myself over to panic and tears. That night, back on Aiko's couch, I received the first of many text messages from Melissa. "Thanks for destroying my future. Hope your trash heap was worth it." I couldn't bring myself to respond, instead staring at the ceiling until the first light of dawn filtered through the curtains. My parents maintained a silence that spoke volumes. No calls, no texts, no acknowledgement of my existence. In some ways, their absence hurt more than Melissa's anger. I had always been the responsible one, the daughter they could count on, and now I had been excised from their lives with frightening ease. The following day, a Saturday, I received an unexpected call from my Uncle Dave, my father's younger brother who lived in Seattle. "Your dad mentioned your situation," he said after brief pleasantries. "I wanted to check in." I braced myself for another lecture, but was surprised when he continued. "You know, I went through something similar with your grandparents when I decided to open my bike shop instead of joining the family accounting firm. Sometimes you have to make choices that disappoint the people you love in order to build the life you need." His understanding brought fresh tears, but also a small spark of hope that perhaps, eventually, my family might come around. Monday brought the additional stress of returning to work for the full week, facing colleagues who had no idea my life had imploded. "How was your weekend?" my cubicle neighbor asked cheerfully. "Did anything fun?" I murmured something about house projects and escaped to the bathroom to compose myself. The financial reality of my situation was becoming clearer and more daunting by the day. The contractor Jake visited the house with me after work and delivered the sobering news that the electrical system would need to be completely replaced before the house could be safely inhabited, a job that would cost nearly $4,000, far more than I had anticipated for initial repairs. "The structure is actually better than it looks," he offered as consolation. "Good bones, as they say, but you've got your work cut out for you." That night, finding a family photo tucked in my wallet while searching for a receipt, I broke down completely. Aiko held me while I sobbed, releasing all the hurt, doubt, and fear that had been building. "Maybe they're right," I choked out between tears. "Maybe this was a huge mistake. I've lost my family over a worthless house I can't even afford to fix." Aiko let me cry myself out before speaking. "Listen to me, Olivia. You made a choice to invest in yourself after a lifetime of putting others first. That's not a mistake. That's growth. It's scary and it's hard, but it's not wrong." Her words didn't immediately erase my doubts, but they gave me enough strength to face the next day and the one after that. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, those days began to build a new version of my life. One I had never imagined, but one that increasingly felt like it might become something authentic and valuable, even if the path to get there was strewn with more obstacles than I had bargained for. With the reluctant blessing of my landlord by proxy, Aiko, I began the process of moving my essential belongings into the house, focusing on making a single room, the small former dining room with the least amount of visible damage, temporarily habitable. I scrubbed every surface, sealed a small crack in the window with clear packing tape, and set up an air mattress, a lamp connected to an extension cord running to a neighbor's outlet, with permission and payment arranged, and a plastic storage bin for my clothes. The first night alone in the house was a test of courage I nearly failed. Every creak and groan of the old structure startled me awake, and the unfamiliar shadows cast by streetlights through the partially boarded windows created monstrous shapes on the walls. At 3 a.m, a sudden scurrying sound sent me bolt upright, heart pounding, until I identified the source as likely a squirrel on the roof, rather than the axe murderer my imagination had conjured. By dawn, I was exhausted but oddly triumphant. I had survived my first night as a homeowner, however uncomfortable. The second day brought an unexpected encounter that would begin to reshape my experience. While attempting to clear some of the front yard debris in the early evening after work, I noticed an elderly woman watching me from the sidewalk, leaning heavily on a cane. "You the new owner?" she called out. I approached, introduced myself, and learned she was Mrs. Wilson. No relation to the former owners who lived 3 houses down. "Been wondering when someone would take on this old place," she said, eyeing my pitiful progress with the yard. My Arthur always said it was a shame to see it go to waste. Before leaving, she said something that would become a pattern in the days ahead. I'm making beef stew tomorrow. I always make too much. I'll bring some by. True to her word, Mrs. Wilson appeared the following evening with a container of still warm stew and a packet of information about the neighborhood's history that she thought might interest me. This was my introduction to a community I hadn't known existed in my years of apartment dwelling. Within days, I had met more neighbors. The Chen family next door, who offered the temporary use of their garden hose and outdoor spigot until my water service was established. Sam, a 16-year-old from across the street who offered to help clear the yard for a modest fee. And the Johnsons, a couple in their 30s who were renovating a similar but less deteriorated house 2 blocks over, and eagerly shared their experiences and recommendations for discount suppliers. The sense of isolation that had enveloped me since the confrontation with my family began to recede, replaced by a tentative connection to this unexpected community. Meanwhile, I threw myself into learning basic home repair skills. My lunch breaks were spent watching instructional videos, evenings after work dedicated to practice. I became a familiar face at the local library, checking out books on everything from basic plumbing to identifying load-bearing walls. My first significant victory came when I successfully repaired the broken front porch steps using salvaged wood from the backyard shed and techniques learned from a YouTube series. The confidence gained from that small accomplishment fueled my determination to tackle increasingly complex projects. 3 weeks into ownership, Jake, the contractor friend, appeared at my door unannounced on a Saturday morning. "I brought reinforcements," he said, gesturing to his truck where 2 of his crew members waited. "We've got a cancellation today, and I thought we might knock out some of that electrical work at friend pricing." The friend pricing was still a stretch for my budget, but with their help, the main electrical panel was replaced and the most critical wiring issues addressed in a single intense day of work, bringing the house significantly closer to being legally habitable. While removing damaged drywall to access wiring, we discovered an unexpected bonus. Behind decades of cheaply installed wall coverings lay the original hardwood wainscoting in remarkably good condition. "That's the thing about these old houses," Jake said, inspecting the find. "Sometimes the ugly renovations actually protect the good stuff underneath." This pattern repeated itself as work progressed. Linoleum peeled back to reveal original hardwood floors, a false ceiling removed to expose beautiful crown molding, and most spectacularly, a small stained glass window discovered in the attic, likely removed from the front door decades ago during a security upgrade and forgotten. Each discovery felt like the house itself was revealing its potential, rewarding my faith and persistence with tangible evidence that my impulsive purchase might not have been so misguided after all. I established a grueling but productive routine. Work during the day, renovation for 4 to 5 hours each evening, collapse into exhausted sleep, repeat. Weekends were entirely dedicated to the house, often with the volunteer assistance of my new neighborhood connections. The progress was slow but steady. One room becoming truly livable, then another. The bathroom made functional if not beautiful. The kitchen at least safe for basic food preparation. My body ached constantly from unaccustomed physical labor. My hands became rough and often bandaged from minor injuries, and I existed in a near-permanent state of exhaustion. Yet paradoxically, I began to feel more alive and purposeful than I had in years, perhaps ever. Each small victory, a wall painted, a fixture replaced, a room cleared of debris, brought a satisfaction entirely different from anything I had experienced in my carefully managed former life. "You look different," Aiko observed during one of our now weekly dinner meetups, usually held at inexpensive restaurants to accommodate my strained budget. Exhausted, definitely, but also, I don't know, more solid somehow. I understood what she meant. Despite the financial stress, the physical challenges, and the ongoing pain of family estrangement, I was becoming someone new. Someone who faced problems directly, who learned from failures, who built something tangible with her own hands. That version of me, emerging slowly through dust and sweat and occasional tears, felt increasingly like someone I was proud to be, regardless of whether my family ever came to see it. 6 weeks after purchasing the house, I received an unexpected call from my cousin Tara, my Uncle Dave's daughter. After awkward pleasantries, she hesitantly shared information that landed like a physical blow. My parents had emptied a significant portion of their retirement accounts to fund Melissa's retreat, which she was currently attending in Bali. "I thought you should know," Tara said uncomfortably. "Aunt Nancy has been telling everyone you refused to help despite having the money, and now they're in financial trouble because of it." The revelation that my parents had jeopardized their future to fulfill Melissa's desires while simultaneously condemning my choices created a complex mixture of emotions. Vindication that my concerns about their finances had been justified. Hurt that they would sacrifice so much for one daughter while rejecting the other, and genuine worry about their long-term security. What followed was a campaign of family gossip that reached me through various channels. Extended family members reaching out with concern, old family friends mentioning things they'd heard, even a former high school classmate whose mother played bridge with my aunt. The narrative being circulated painted me as selfish, and my house as something between a crack den and a death trap, with embellishments growing more dramatic with each retelling. Attempts to correct the record were met with skepticism or polite disengagement, the original story apparently more entertaining than the truth. I tried to focus on the progress with the house rather than the pain of these betrayals, but the stress inevitably affected other areas of my life. At work, my performance began to suffer noticeably. Twice I missed morning meetings after staying up until 3 working on essential plumbing repairs, and my usually meticulous marketing reports contained uncharacteristic errors. My boss, Sandra, called me into her office after I dozed off during a client presentation. "I don't know what's going on with you," she said, "but this isn't the Olivia I hired. Consider this an official warning." I promised improvement, knowing, even as I spoke, that something would have to give in my unsustainable schedule. Meanwhile, Melissa had begun posting daily updates from her retreat, beachfront yoga sessions, smiling group photos with her new soul family, philosophical captions about releasing negativity that seemed pointed given the timing. Each post received enthusiastic comments from my parents, their support a stark contrast to their continued silence toward me. My repeated attempts to reach out, carefully worded texts, voicemails, even a handwritten letter, went unanswered, except for a brief message from my father. "We need time. Please respect that." The approach of Thanksgiving brought the painful realization that for the first time in my life, I would not be spending the holiday with family. Aiko invited me to join her family's celebration, but a last-minute pipe leak in the kitchen required immediate attention, leaving me alone with a microwave dinner on the holiday. As I sat on my newly sanded but not yet finished floors, eating turkey and instant mashed potatoes from a plastic tray, I allowed myself a solid hour of self-pity before returning to the pipe repair. The following week brought the crisis I had been dreading, a company-wide email announcing restructuring due to lost clients, with a subsequent private meeting where Sandra regretfully informed me that my position was being eliminated. "Your performance issues didn't help," she admitted. "But honestly, this would have happened regardless. We've lost the Westridge account, and marketing is taking the biggest hit." I was offered a modest severance package, 2 weeks' pay plus accrued vacation time, and asked to clear out my desk by the end of the day. The timing couldn't have been worse. The electrical work had depleted most of my remaining savings, and the ongoing costs of materials for essential repairs continued regardless of my employment status. I had been counting on at least another month of salary before the house would be in condition to pass inspection for permanent utilities, a necessity before I could consider it truly habitable rather than camping in a construction zone. The job market in Portland was competitive even for employed candidates with current references. As an unemployed applicant with a recent performance warning, my prospects seemed bleak. I threw myself into an aggressive job search, applying for positions I was overqualified for alongside reach opportunities that would normally be a step up. Simultaneously, I accelerated work on the house, recognizing that completing enough repairs to make it officially habitable would eliminate my largest ongoing expense, the rent I continued to contribute to Aiko despite primarily living at the house. Days blurred into an exhausting cycle of online job applications, interviews that went nowhere, and increasingly desperate renovation work. My severance ran out quickly, followed by my emergency fund. I began selling non-essential possessions to buy construction materials, each trip to the hardware store becoming an exercise in painful prioritization. The breaking point came during an early December rainstorm. A section of patched roof gave way, sending water cascading into what I had hoped would be my finished bedroom within weeks. Standing in the middle of the room at midnight, frantically positioning buckets and pots to catch the leaks, soaked to the skin and shivering in the unheated house. I finally confronted the possibility that my parents and sister had been right, that I had destroyed my family relationships, derailed my career, and depleted my savings for a hopeless case. For the first time since purchasing the house, I seriously considered giving up, walking away from the property, bankrupting myself in the process, and starting over with whatever scraps of dignity and resources I could salvage. The thought formed with perfect clarity. I had made a catastrophic mistake, and there was no path forward that didn't involve admitting defeat. I sat down on the wet floor, surrounded by the sounds of dripping water and howling wind, and allowed myself to fully feel the magnitude of what seemed like inevitable failure. The moment of despair, complete and overwhelming as it was, contained the seed of its own solution. Still sitting on the wet floor of what should have been my bedroom, I found myself mindlessly scrolling through rental listings on my phone. Partly to torture myself with what I could have afforded if I hadn't sunk everything into the house, partly because homelessness was becoming a real possibility if I couldn't find income soon. A listing for a charming private room in historic home caught my eye. $500 weekly for a bedroom in a renovated Victorian, shared bathroom and kitchen access, utilities included. I stared at the listing for several minutes. Before the idea crystallized, I had a house with 3 bedrooms. I only needed 1. The front bedroom was the closest to being finished, needing primarily cosmetic work rather than structural repairs. If I could complete that single room to a rentable standard, I could potentially generate income while continuing to renovate the rest of the house. The next morning, I researched Portland's short-term rental regulations and permit requirements, discovering that my property's zoning allowed for such use with relatively straightforward paperwork. With renewed purpose, I redirected all my remaining resources and energy toward making the front bedroom and shared bathroom presentable. Jake, hearing of my job loss and new plan, brought over leftover paint and flooring materials from other projects. Mr. Chen helped me install a programmable keypad lock on the front door for future guest access. Sam, the neighborhood teenager, spent a weekend helping me deep clean and prepare the room in exchange for math tutoring for his upcoming SATs. Within 2 weeks of my midnight epiphany, I had transformed the front bedroom into something genuinely appealing. Freshly painted walls in a warm cream, refinished original hardwood floors, a carefully restored built-in bookcase, and simple but attractive furnishings cobbled together from thrift stores and neighborhood free piles. I wrote a listing that emphasized honesty. Private room in 1920s cottage undergoing loving restoration. Experience Portland's historic architecture in transition. Comfortable, clean private bedroom in otherwise under renovation home. Perfect. For the adventurous traveler who appreciates character over luxury, shared bathroom, access to simple kitchen facilities, friendly owner lives on site and is happy to share renovation journey and neighborhood recommendations. I set the rate. Deliberately low, $40 per night with discounts for weekly or monthly stays, and crossed my fingers. 3 days later, I received my first booking request. A traveling nurse named Diana needed accommodation for a 6-week contract at a nearby hospital, starting immediately. The monthly rate I had offered was significantly less than she would pay elsewhere, and as a healthcare worker, she kept long hours that would give me plenty of time to work on the house without disturbing her. It seemed almost too perfect, raising fears that once she saw the reality of the still very much under construction property, she would demand a refund and leave scathing reviews that would kill my rental business before it began. Instead, Diana arrived, surveyed the property with clinical objectivity, pronounced her room perfectly functional, and proceeded to become not just a reliable tenant but an unexpected ally. I grew up in a family of contractors, she revealed over shared coffee during her first weekend. I know my way around basic electrical work if you ever need an extra pair of hands. The steady income from Diana's stay, modest as it was, provided enough financial breathing room to continue essential repairs and maintain my job search. Through Diana's hospital connections, I was introduced to a real estate agent who specialized in medical facility properties and needed someone to take listing photos. I usually hire professionals, she explained, but my regular photographer is booked solid for the next 2 months, and I have listings that can't wait. My marketing background included basic photography skills, and with the help of YouTube, tutorials and practice, I was able to produce images that satisfied her requirements. What began as a one-time gig evolved into a regular side hustle, providing additional income while allowing me flexibility to continue house repairs and job interviews. In a stroke of unexpected good fortune, a local blog focused on Portland neighborhood revitalization discovered my project through community connections and requested an interview about grassroots urban renewal. The resulting feature, Portland's youngest urban homesteader breathes new life into abandoned historic property, included before-in-progress photos of the house and a quote from Mrs. Wilson about how my efforts were bringing pride back to the block. The publicity generated interest in my short-term rental, creating a wait list of potential guests for when Diana's stay concluded, and also led to connections with local salvage companies willing to provide discounted materials in exchange for mentions in future articles. As December progressed, the absence of family became increasingly painful despite my improving circumstances. Christmas decorations appeared in neighborhood windows, holiday music played in stores, and conversations everywhere turned to family gatherings and traditions. I had accepted that I would spend the holiday alone when Mr. Chen appeared at my doctor on Christmas Eve. "My family is gathering tonight," he said simply. "Too many people, too much food. You will join us." His tone made it clear this was not merely an invitation, but an expectation. That evening, surrounded by 3 generations of the Chen family in their warm, chaotic home, I experienced a different kind of belonging than I had ever known with my biological family. No one expected me to be anything other than who I was. No invisible scorecards, no shifting standards, no competition for attention or approval. Mrs. Chen pressed second and third helpings on me. Their children showed me their holiday gifts with unself-conscious enthusiasm, and Mr. Chen proudly introduced me to relatives as our neighbor who is bringing the Wilson house back to life. When I returned to my own house late that night, it no longer felt like a symbol of family rejection, but rather the beginning of something new. A different kind of connection to people who valued me for my efforts rather than my compliance with their expectations. For the first time, I could envision a future where the renovation's completion wasn't just a vindication of my decision, but a genuine achievement to be celebrated on its own terms. 6 months after the auction, the transformation of both the house and my life had exceeded my most optimistic projections. The exterior renovation was nearly complete. New roof, repaired siding painted a cheerful sage green, restored front porch with period-appropriate details, and landscaping that, while simple, had reclaimed the yard from years of neglect. Inside, 2 bedrooms were fully renovated and almost continuously rented through my now well-reviewed short-term rental listing, providing steady income that funded ongoing work on the remaining spaces. My employment situation had stabilized as well. After 3 months of temporary positions and freelance work, I secured a marketing coordinator position with a local sustainability-focused firm. A lateral move in terms of title, but with better compensation and a company culture that valued work-life balance, allowing me to maintain my renovation schedule. My side business photographing real estate listings had grown enough to provide significant supplemental income, with regular clients referring others and even requests to photograph commercial properties. The local newspaper ran a feature on neighborhood revitalization efforts, prominently featuring before and after photos of my house alongside quotes from neighbors about the positive ripple effect of my renovation inspiring other improvement projects on the street. While I savored the vindication this public recognition provided, the continued silence from my family cast a shadow over these achievements. Melissa had returned from her retreat 3 months earlier with a yoga teacher certification, but no immediate career prospects in the competitive Portland wellness market. Through neighborhood grapevine connections, I heard she had moved back into our parents' home temporarily while exploring her options. Financial difficulties within my family were becoming increasingly apparent to their social circle, with my parents quietly listing their boat for sale and my mother returning to part-time work at her former accounting firm after years of retirement. I had maintained sporadic contact with Uncle Dave, who occasionally provided these updates while respecting my parents' boundaries. The uneasy equilibrium shattered unexpectedly on a Saturday afternoon in June, nearly 7 months after the confrontation. I was staining newly installed kitchen cabinets when a knock at the door revealed my father standing on the porch, newspaper tucked under his arm, expression unreadable. "I saw the article," he said after a moment of heavy silence, holding up the newspaper featuring my house. "May I come in?" The conversation that followed was stilted and cautious at first. both of us navigating the unfamiliar territory of our estrangement. He walked through the house, taking in the transformation with visible surprise. "This is not what I expected," he admitted, running his hand along a restored original banister. "When you described your plans, I couldn't envision this." We settled in the partially finished kitchen, where I offered coffee and waited for whatever had truly brought him to my door. "Your mother and I," he began, then paused to clear his throat. "We haven't been fair to you." The admission hung in the air between us. "The situation with the retreat and your house purchase, we handled it badly, but there were things you didn't know." He proceeded to reveal what I had long suspected. Their financial situation was significantly worse than they had let on, with credit card debt accumulated to maintain appearances and support Melissa's various endeavors, second and third mortgages on their home, and retirement accounts that had been repeatedly tapped for emergencies that were often Melissa's abandoned ventures. "We thought the retreat would be different," he said, "that she'd finally found her path. We couldn't tell her no, not again, but we couldn't afford it either. When you announced you'd spent money on this house," he gestured around us, "it felt like you were deliberately sabotaging her chance, choosing a rundown property over your sister's future." I let him talk, years of family dynamics unspooling as he gradually acknowledged the pattern of expectations placed on me versus those placed on Melissa. "We justified it by telling ourselves you were the strong one, the capable one. She needed more support. But that wasn't fair to you, and I see that now." He reached for my hand across the table. "I'm proud of what you've done here, Olivia. You saw potential where we saw only problems, and you made it real through sheer determination. That's extraordinary." The reconciliation was incomplete. My mother remained unwilling to visit, her pride still an insurmountable barrier. But it was a beginning. My father promised to keep working on her, and in the meantime, we established a tentative new relationship based on phone calls and occasional dinners at neutral locations. 3 weeks after my father's visit, Melissa appeared on my doorstep unannounced, her expression a complex mixture of defiance and uncertainty. Unlike our father's cautious approval, Melissa's reaction to the house was initially dismissive. "So, this is what you chose over my career," she said, eyeing the kitchen renovation with exaggerated indifference. The conversation that followed was painful but necessary. Years of unacknowledged resentment and competition finally spoken aloud. "You've always been the favorite," she accused. "The perfect daughter with the perfect grades and the perfect job." I laughed without humor. "And you've always been the one whose dreams matter, whose desires come first, whose failures are just stepping stones to the next opportunity everyone rushes to fund." The argument escalated, then gradually transformed into something more honest as exhaustion replaced anger. For perhaps the first time, we spoke to each other as adults rather than as competitors for parental approval. "I was jealous of your certainty," Melissa admitted finally. "You always seemed to know exactly what you wanted and how to get it. I'm still trying to figure out who I am." By the time she left, something fundamental had shifted between us. Not forgiveness exactly, not yet, but recognition of each other's struggles, of the roles we had been assigned in our family's drama, of the possibility that we might eventually find our way to a relationship not defined by our parents' expectations. "The house really is beautiful," she said at the door, the first genuine compliment she had offered. "Maybe you could help me figure out what color to paint my room at Mom and Dad's. Apparently, I'm staying longer than I thought." It was a small olive branch, but I recognized it for the effort it represented. "I'd like that," I replied, meaning it despite the lingering hurt. The healing of family wounds proved to be like the renovation itself, a long process of addressing fundamental issues rather than cosmetic fixes, with progress measured in small improvements rather than dramatic transformations. There were setbacks, a particularly difficult family dinner that ended in renewed argument, weeks of silence following thoughtless comments, but the general trajectory was toward rebuilding, however slowly. My mother's first visit to the house, when it finally happened nearly 9 months after the confrontation, was a study in conflicting emotions. Her pride prevented outright acknowledgement of my success, but I caught the moments of genuine surprise and reluctant admiration as she noted original features I had painstakingly restored, clever storage solutions, and the overall transformation, from abandonment to beauty. "It's not what I expected," she said finally, an echo of my father's words that represented the closest she could come to approval. It wasn't the wholehearted validation I had once craved, but I was surprised to discover it was enough, her opinion no longer the defining measure of my choice's worth. On the 1-year anniversary of the auction, I hosted a celebration that symbolized how profoundly my life had changed. The backyard, once an impenetrable jungle of weeds and debris, had been transformed into a simple but inviting garden space. With a wooden deck built from reclaimed materials, strings of lights crisscrossing overhead, and potted herbs filling the air with fragrance. Around the large salvage table gathered an unlikely family of choice: Aiko and her boyfriend, the Chens, Mrs. Wilson, Jake and his wife, Diana the traveling nurse who had become a friend between contracts, and a rotating cast of former short-term guests who remained in touch. The house itself stood as testimony to what determination and vision could accomplish. The final renovation touches had been completed the week before. Vintage-style light fixtures installed in the hallway. The last room painted, period-appropriate house numbers affixed to the freshly painted front door. What had once been a neighborhood eyesore was now frequently photographed by architecture enthusiasts and featured in a local historic homes publication. The transformation had inspired others on the block. 3 other properties had undergone significant improvements in the month since I began, creating a noticeable ripple effect of neighborhood pride. My professional life had stabilized into something more fulfilling than what I had left behind. The marketing coordinator position had evolved into a role that included community outreach, allowing me to use my renovation experience to help connect the sustainability firm with local revitalization efforts. My side business, photographing? Real estate had grown enough to require occasional subcontracting when my schedule couldn't accommodate all requests. Most significantly, I had launched a blog documenting my renovation journey, which had gained a modest but engaged following of first-time homebuyers looking to enter challenging markets through similar methods. The most unexpected development came 6 weeks before the anniversary, when my mother arrived for what had become a monthly inspection tour of the latest improvements. Instead of her usual careful mix of mild approval and subtle suggestions for changes, she brought a housewarming gift, a quilt she had made herself, patterned after the stained glass window I had restored for the entryway. "I thought it might look nice in the master bedroom," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "The colors match what you've done in there." The gesture represented months of effort, both in the creation of the quilt itself and in the emotional work of moving toward genuine acceptance. Our relationship remained complicated, the patterns of a lifetime not easily rewritten, but we were learning to know each other as adults rather than through the restrictive roles of our family script. My sister's journey toward understanding had progressed more quickly, perhaps because her own post-retreat struggles had created unexpected empathy. After 3 failed attempts to launch yoga classes at local studios, Melissa had found herself facing the kind of persistent rejection I had experienced for years in the housing market. "I never understood before how hard it is to keep trying when nothing seems to work out," she admitted during one of our now regular coffee meetings. "You just kept going with this house even when it seemed impossible." Her growing respect for my perseverance had gradually transformed into genuine interest in the renovation process itself. To my surprise, Melissa revealed an aptitude for design, elements I often overlooked, her artistic eye complementing my more practical approach. She had recently begun bringing lunch to the house on Saturdays to help with whatever project I had underway, our childhood competitiveness slowly giving way to an appreciation of our different strengths. My father had become an unexpected ally. In practical matters, his engineering background proving valuable when complex structural issues arose. Though he never directly apologized for the initial rejection, his consistent presence and willingness to spend weekends helping with projects spoke louder than words could have. "Your grandfather would be proud," he said once while helping install new water pipes. "He always said you could judge a person's character by how they handle tools and problems. You handle both pretty damn well." The anniversary dinner represented the culmination of a year's work on both the house and my own understanding of what truly mattered. As we shared food and stories under the evening sky, I realized that the house had given me far more than physical shelter. It had provided the catalyst for breaking dysfunctional patterns, for discovering capabilities I never knew I possessed, for building authentic connections based on mutual respect rather than obligation. When the conversation naturally turned to my renovation journey, I found myself saying, the biggest restoration wasn't the house, it was me. I had to tear down years of trying to be what everyone else needed and rebuild based on my own foundation. The nods of understanding around the table reflected the genuine community that had formed through shared work and mutual support, something I had never experienced in the carefully maintained appearances of my family life. Later that evening, after guests had departed, I sat alone on the front porch swing I had installed the previous month, looking at the home I had created through sheer determination and countless hours of labor. The house stood as physical proof that sometimes the most rejected options contained the greatest potential. That value existed beyond what others could immediately recognize. That transformation required both vision and the willingness to do difficult, unglamorous work day after day. Perhaps most importantly, I had learned that real strength wasn't found in meeting others' expectations or sacrificing my needs to maintain peace, but in the courage to define success on my own terms, and the resilience to pursue it despite opposition. When my phone chimed with a text from my mother, a simple, "The dinner was lovely. Dad and I are proud of you," I found myself smiling at how far we had all come. The journey hadn't been what any of us expected, but the destination had proven worth every painful step along the way. Have you ever had to choose between other people's expectations and your own dreams? Did you follow the path others wanted for you, or did you take the risk to build something that was truly yours? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this journey of turning rejection into triumph resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and share this video with someone who might need encouragement to follow their own path, even when it seems impossible. Thank you for being part of this incredible year of transformation with me. Your support means more than you know.